And welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Tony Gold. This is our post-match show of Fulham doing the double over Scott Parker and Burnley. And I look forward to talking to Tony about that. But we also have some other information that we will be discussing in Cottage Talk talking points. I've got some information that I've learned over the weekend in regards to the situation with Ricardo Pepi. We'll be discussing that along with the reports that reportedly, Fulham are going to pick up the option on Samuel Chukwueze, which is interesting in itself. Good amount to talk about. Also, we have to go through my prediction and Tony's prediction for the month of March. How did we do? How did Fulham do? We're going to go through that as well. Ton to talk about. Let's just get going. Before we do, my friend, it's always good to see you. Always good to see you after victory. We could pick at the victory, and we're going to do that. But how you doing, my friend?
I'm really good, Russ. Thank you. Yeah, really good. And yes, it was, Saturday was great for a number of reasons for me because obviously,
let's talk about that.
Met a lot of the hammy guys and girls as well. To be honest,
yeah.
Kamal, Suhail, Alex, Ben and Holly. So yeah, it was a really good day. And obviously, the sun was shining. The place was buzzing. Went for a drink after, so it was all good. For 67 minutes, it wasn't, but we'll talk about that. But look, Fulham at the end of the day, they got the result, Russ, and at this moment of time, this point of the season, that's more that's the most important thing is the result, not so much the performance, but the result. And I'm sure that we'll play a lot better and not get the result. So, yeah, at the end of the day, good 3 points and on to Liverpool.
Yeah, and I'll add to this. At least we're not Tottenham. I could, I watched that debacle. Okay, to be honest with you, I was actually thinking about this before we go on any further. Watching the Tottenham match, just a little side note, watching the Tottenham match and then also seeing what happened with West Ham. What I find interesting, Tony, is right now, Tottenham aren't the only team in this mess. West Ham is, Nottingham Forest are a little bit safer, and Leeds are. But it's all about Tottenham. Why is it all about Tottenham? I think I know the reason. You give me your thoughts. Why is no one else being discussed except for Tottenham in this relegation battle?
Because they're in an unprecedented position, and no one in their wildest dreams, not even the staunchest Arsenal fans, could sort of pinpoint Tottenham being, in the mess that they're in and the position they're in. And they, I watched that game yesterday, Russell, and they are in a big mess. So you know what? I couldn't care less. I think you're absolutely right. Leeds are still in it and could well get dragged into it. It is going to be a proper dogfight down there. So, for us, thankfully, we're at the other end fighting for other things that are more important. So, look, we're a long way away from where Tottenham are, and it's a good place to be. But we've got our own battles, Russell, and we've got our own issues that we need to sort out as a football club. So, let's hope that we can get those resolved quickly.
I totally agree. And listen, we're going to go through all of that in this show. This is going to be a very interesting show. And let's just get to Cottage Talk talking points. I got several topics for us to really dive into. The first one goes back to our predictions in March. Okay, you and I, we're still in March, but again, it was for the month of March, the matches in March. You and I both had 10 points. We both had 10 points. We both actually, I think it was identical, right? Everything was identical. Fulham got 7 points, Tony. So the question being, did Fulham do enough in March to seriously contend to get into Europe? If you look at where they are, how far off they are, the answer would be yes, but did they do enough?
I think, look, 7 out of 12 is not bad. I think that the disappointing one for me obviously was the defeat to West Ham, and obviously the draw to Forest. But you take a point against Forest, who I said are fighting for their lives. We should never have lost that West Ham game, but that's football. That's the nature of the league that we're in, Russ. So that result Saturday against Burnley was massive, because had we not got that result, and ended up losing that game, then, we'd be having a very, very different, conversation right now. So look, I think 7 out of 12 is respectable. And, going back after the international break, Fulham have got, massive 3 games. And so, as we always say, the old cliche, you've got to take every game as it comes. Liverpool away from home, not going to be easy. But, that's what Fulham are facing now. That's the battle they're going to have.
Right. And listen, I totally understand that, Tony. But the one thing that I will say about this is funny because it's almost like, you talk about Liverpool, but have you seen Liverpool lately? Listen, we have our friend Chris. He can back us on I hear what you're saying, but Liverpool are not Liverpool right now. And like you said, we're seeing unprecedented things, like you said, with Tottenham. So I would say that they're in it because I think this year it's unpredictable. The point total might be less than what we thought. I don't know if 60 is going to be the number. I think it might be a little less, which might get them into that realm of, say, 7th, 8th, or maybe even 9th. I've seen some reports that 9th might be able to be a Europa League conference. Again, we're just got to see how it all shakes out. But right now, they are where they are, and it's not terrible, Tony. Like you said, it could be a lot worse.
I think with Liverpool, Russ, they've got very similar vulnerabilities to us, actually.
Yeah.
Defensively, they are not in a.
See, Chris is already predicting it. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. You're
yeah, he's covering himself, though, isn't he? He's covering himself.
Yes.
I look. It's Liverpool are going through a transition for me. With everything they've had to deal with the death of Jota, that's affected the club absolutely massively, more so than people can ever think of and think about. If you can imagine, if that had happened to any other football team, any player within our club that were to go through that kind of experience, the whole club would suffer from it, Russell. So I think Liverpool, this is a sort of a transition season for them.
Yeah.
Once they move into next year, that will be very different. As far as we're concerned, to go to Liverpool in order for us to get a result there, we are, number one, going to have to defend very well. And number two, we're going to have to be very, very brave, in the final third and be very attack-minded. And I just don't see Silva setting us up to play that way. So, it's going to be a very interesting game. And as I say, one that obviously we have to win. So, he's got it all to do.
Well, that's what's interesting about all this, Tony, because, listen, we could even go further, like you said. The situation with Liverpool, I think all matches are to play for. Even Arsenal, I think there's an opportunity there. But listen, I happen to watch the Sunderland match, right? No one would have thought that Sunderland would go to St. James's Park and get that victory, and they did. And we beat Sunderland. And again, I saw Liverpool struggle against Tottenham, and look what we did to Tottenham. I mean, we could do all this. So I think that there's an opportunity there. But I'm glad that you mentioned this, because ultimately it comes down to the players, but it also comes down to Marco Silva and how he sets Fulham up. Does he want to be brave Silva or safe Silva? I think that's going to be a huge factor as we get towards the end of the season with these matches. Will he just go for it, or will he protect what we already have? It's just an interesting thing, because I see a little fight going on. This is just me watching this. It's like, does he want to go for it, or is he playing it safe? And again, it's like this little game. And I think that's what we saw at Craven Cottage, a little game. First half, little cagey, get behind, then we got to open it up, right? Then all of a sudden, it's like a different Fulham team. Shocker, right? I'm going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the two sides of Fulham, because I think that's what that is. All right, my friend. Like I said, I got some great topics for us. Let's now talk about the news I actually saw this morning coming out of, I believe it's originally coming out of Italy. Fulham Fan News had it as well. So basically, I'm just going to share this. I just saw this just a few minutes ago, but there have been other reports as well about Samuel Chukwueze. So I'm just going to share this post. And here it is. And it just says, this is coming from Italy is that Fulham have informed AC Milan of their intention to trigger the 24 million buy option for Chukwueze. All right, Tony. It's funny because if you asked me before AFCON, absolutely yes. After AFCON, and again, listen, he's dealing with, a real emotional time, just like Raul. Maybe that's a factor in all this too. He has not been the same player, but maybe there's a reason for it. But here's the thing. If Fulham do pick up the option, what are your thoughts on that, if this is to be true?
I think that with all of that talk, if that's the road Fulham are going down, that suggests to me that Harry Wilson's off. That's the first thing to say.
I've seen that. I've seen that talk. Right.
I don't think Chukwueze would be happy signing and then being a bit part player, because that's he would be rotated, and obviously you've got to factor in Bob and Kevin and then all the other issues. So the fact that they're talking about it would suggest to me that Harry Wilson is very unlikely going to sign the contract, and there's something drastic happens. Look, we all know that Chukwueze's got ability, Russ. For me, he's one of those players that needs to be playing regularly. He's a player that needs that sharpness because of the nature of the position he plays, and in order to get the best out of a player, you've got to be playing regularly. And the bottom line is he just hasn't been playing enough football. Yeah. And I think it's affected him. Obviously, personal issues of you've got to factor into that as well. So all in all, yeah, look, since he's been back, he hasn't set the world alight. And I think he's struggling with a bit of confidence and a bit of quality, actually. But, it's hard to be too harsh on him, because I think, as I say, he's gone through a lot. And I think he needs a proper, full pre-season with us if he does sign. And then I think, once this season's out the way and done and dusted, he can focus on, getting into this side and showing the qualities that he's quite clearly got. So I'm not against it. But, what you don't want to do is have too many players in too many positions, and then players get unhappy and they're not, getting enough football, and then their confidence dips and, all of that sort of stuff. It's you want a full solid side. And I think ultimately he will be a good signing if he's going to be playing on a regular basis.
Okay, and I'm glad that you brought up that point. The minute you said that, I was thinking to myself, and I was also remembering what you and I were talking about with Kevin, right? Kevin was really struggling at the beginning of his career with Fulham. And once he started to play more, once he got consistent play, as you and I were talking about, you started to see a player change and come into his own. Unfortunately, he had the injury, and that ruined everything for the rest of his season. We'll see if he returns this season. But there are good things to come. The situation with Chukwueze is in reverse. He comes to us. He starts off really strong all the way to AFCON. It was all the way to AFCON. Comes back, and he hasn't been able to hit the same strides he did before. And I'm glad that you mentioned this. And I think there are factors in it, but I also think it's regular playing is a factor as well. I don't think you become bad overnight. I think that there's a talent there, but I think that there are reasons why we're not seeing the best of him now. I think that we still will. I would definitely do this. I would do this. But to your point, Tony, and Wayne actually just said this when I was at the Cottage Saturday, I did hear about Harry Wilson's on his way out of Fulham Football Club. If I was a betting man, I would bet on that. I would bet that he's not coming back. Okay. And if they do pick up this option, I think that will also tell a tale. I think could be a part of this, right? Because you don't want to have too many players fighting for positions. You want just enough. And I don't think you can have Chukwueze and him next season. I think that might be a little too much, even though you do right now. So for me, I think if it does happen, I do agree, Tony. I think Harry Wilson will be on his way out. And if that is the case, I wish him all the best. And we've had not just one great season, but he's actually gotten better and better in his Fulham career. It really has been going well. And I'd be happy to say that we've seen in what I would call probably his best season. So if this is Chukwueze and Wilson doesn't come back, at least we can look at Wilson and say, listen, we saw a phenomenal season from him. And then maybe someday we'll see that from Chukwueze.
Yeah, look, I think Harry Wilson, he's 29. What, he was 29 yesterday, wasn't he?
Yeah.
You know, he's hit a major milestone in his career now. And I think he's got to think very, very carefully about where he goes from here. You know, sometimes a hand and a glove just fits perfectly.
Yeah.
And I think Harry Wilson and Fulham really works well. And if I was Harry Wilson, you know, I'd be thinking to myself, look, Fulham are going to still give me a decent salary, a decent wage. I'm happy here. I'm settled. I'm loved by the fans. This is my home. You know, Silva rates me. He plays me. I'm getting regular football. And I'm just going to sign a 3-year deal and you know, stay and that will be it. Money, unfortunately, talks for us, as we all know. And maybe he's looking at it and thinking the next 3 years, a club can pay him, you know, 100K plus.
Set him up. Set him up for the rest. Set him up, man.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I get that. But we all know, and we've seen it many, 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 many times before, if he goes to an Everton or if he goes to an Aston Villa.
Yeah.
Or
and Ralph is asking, could be one of these clubs.
Yeah,
could be.
Well, it's likely to be one of those clubs. He's not going to a top 5 club. Let's put it that way. He's not going to an Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City. He's not going to one of them. But a Villa, Everton, you know, one of those is a possibility. And you know, there's talk that if Wrexham come up, he might even be, you know, going there. So look, we'll see what happens. But I'd be very careful if I was Harry Wilson, because when you go to those clubs, you're not guaranteed anything. And if you don't perform and you're not performing, you can find yourself on the sidelines very quickly. And that is my fear and my worry for someone like Harry Wilson, because, you know, there are moments where he is consistent and he doesn't perform, a bit like Saturday.
Right. Well, he was on fire on Saturday.
Well, for the first 67 minutes, he wasn't. You know, he had one decent shot in the first half, but that was about it. But then suddenly, he came alive. But you know, you need more from a player like that in a game like that. You need more from him. And the bottom line is that time will tell. And you know, we can't waste any more time with him, really. At the end of the day, the fans want him to stay. He needs to sign, but he's leaving his options open. And, you know, I don't blame him, to be perfectly honest. So we'll see.
Right. And listen, I don't blame him for cashing in, right? I do think that this is a good situation for him. Like you said, great situation for the player, for the club, if he was to stay, because it works. It works really well, right? So you would say that makes the most sense for Harry Wilson. But money does talk, as you just mentioned. And like I said, again, this is just something that I had heard months ago, that his agent was looking for, you know, we're talking 200K a week. I mean, that's ridiculous, you know? Again, you know, and then someone said 150. I said, no, listen, what I heard was 200. So I don't know, but that's silly money. And Fulham shouldn't be doing something like that at his age, obviously, even though he's played well. You don't give that type of money to someone of, you know, at that age. You simply do not do that. You know, like, I mean, they have given decent money to older players, but I would be spending it more on players that have more upside in their future than someone that has, you know, again, is basically at his peak, and you will not be getting better. You won't be seeing better from Harry Wilson. This is the best you're going to see. I would pay him well, but I'm not going to pay him like that. That's for someone that actually is really on the rise, a young player on the rise. I wouldn't be doing that, but it's not. I will also say it's not my money, but it's just not something that I would be doing. But we'll see what happens. It's something to watch. If they do pick up the option, does that mean that Harry Wilson is not coming back to Fulham? I would say there's a good chance of that, and for the reasons we're talking about. All right, Tony, let's get to now talking about Ricardo Pepi. And when I saw this, over the weekend, it actually really was disappointing me, because I've been following this. I sent you, when I first started to see the information that he was coming to London, that it looked like it was, you know, taking on a medical, and this all plays out like theater. It actually played out this way, like a movie, like a film, this whole thing. Finally, there's a breakthrough. He is on a plane. We're following him. He's now in London. He's taken the medical. Everything seems to be going smooth, but we haven't had an update. And then you start seeing the reports that it fell through. that the deal fell through. So why did the deal fall through? And again, there are a lot of factors in this. Before we get into your thoughts on it, I am going to share the exclusive information that I was given. Okay. And again, this source isn't coming from, say, a Fulham source or even a source in the Netherlands. I'm in the US. We'll just call it a source in the US. We'll just leave it there. Okay. Source in the US. I got a message about this. So I've not seen it reported anywhere. So I'm just telling you, that's why I'm calling this exclusive. So I'm going to share it now. So something was revealed in Pepi's medical with Fulham. This is what was sent to me. And that basically the director of football basically flipped the script on the deal. So again, interesting. Ernie Stewart is director of football. Oh, by the way, he's a former U.S. men's national team player back in the World Cup days, and I believe 1994. So he obviously there's a U.S. angle to all this with Ricardo Pepi. And there's again, the talk has been the reason why it fell through, Tony, is because Fulham wanted some assurances for injuries, potentially when Fulham would have control of the player, when PSV Eindhoven would have control of the player. But it sounds like it came down to basically a situation of who's responsible for Ricardo Pepi. Injury related too. That's what I've been reading. So if my information is correct, like I said, it's speculation. It's just something I was sent. Something was in the medical. My first thought was, well, then Fulham need to protect themselves. Fulham need to protect themselves because I see the comments. How did this all go wrong? Blaming Fulham. And I think it's easy to do that. And I've killed the club on many occasions. I'm actually saying not so fast, because if this is true, there was an issue. He did play for PSV Eindhoven on Sunday. I watched the match, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something that's a question in his medical. Okay, that doesn't mean that there could still be a question. If you're investing all this money in a player, you're investing a ton of money. You need some assurances, or maybe again, it opens up more negotiating. So I don't if this is all to be true, if my information is to be true, I don't blame the club. Tony, what do you make of all this?
In my opinion, Russell, we've dodged a bullet. Look, that's why players have medicals, because medicals are there to show up any frailties within a football. We know that over the last few years, he's had injury issues. Paul's right; it's not only a joke; it's like a circus. The bottom line is we've dodged a bullet there, and for that kind of money, you can't be taking a gamble. Every signing is a gamble.
Right.
Potentially injury prone.
Right.
And spending all that money, plus he's got a World Cup to get through before he gets back to Fulham and stuff. It's too much there's too much going on. And there's clearly something that's shown up that they are not happy about. And, it's a lot of money to spend on a player, who could break down because of something that's shown up in the medical. So as far as I'm concerned, and also, like I've said, we've had this conversation, Russ.
Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, if we're signing this player, then Marco Silva, if he's staying, has to change the way Fulham play. He has to change the shape. He has to change the formation, and he has to change the style in which we play, because Pepe would not suit the system that we currently play. So how is that going to work? So look, at the end of the day, in my opinion, we have absolutely dodged the bullet, and I think there is better players out there that are available for a little bit more, but that are not going to show up with any injury problems or have any of this nonsense that's going to come baggage effectively that's going to come with them. So for me, it's the right decision at the moment.
Okay, so just like an interesting situation again. It's made huge news over here. You can imagine it's made huge news over here. So that's why I was probably contacted. Okay, so and I get that. because I talk about Fulham. So very interesting. So like I said, if the news is to be that I was told to be true, then I totally understand that. But what's also interesting, a different way to look at this, Tony, I almost feel like Fulham are getting a taste of their own medicine. What I mean is João Palhinha going to Bayern Munich. They think it's all done, right? They think it's done. They think it's done having the medical, taking shots with the shirt, with the media department, with Bayern Munich. Remember all that. And Fulham couldn't find a replacement, and that all falls through. This is in reverse. This now happens to Fulham. Was this also a ploy by PSV Eindhoven to look for an excuse? You know what? We're just going to walk away. We're basically trying to appease the player, because reportedly, and I've been reading this, the player wants to come to Fulham. The player definitely wants to come. Well, I shouldn't say definitely. It's a report. So the speculation is he wants to come. So I feel bad if that is true, because I would like him. I don't think it's dead. Then there are reports that it's not dead. But going back to what I had learned, my first thought was, as you said, you got to be careful if you're investing that kind of money. We'll go back to the medical, right, with Emil Smith-Rowe. Emil Smith-Rowe came with all kinds of baggage, Tony, coming off of all these injuries. So I want the club to do an extensive medical. I want to be sure if they're going to invest that money, because, it does happen when you buy a player and they're damaged goods. I think Fulham did the right thing. I don't know what we're talking about, what it might have been, but if it was something that made them look for more assurances and that's why the thing fell through, so be it, Tony. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, look, I think for me, these things always happen for a reason.
Right.
And if it was meant to be, then everything would be, cushy, and it would be, going through and we'd be sitting here. So look, I think in answer to Emma's question there, I think the reason why the medical in March is because both parties wanted to get it done, wanted to get something, concrete and not have to mess around come the end of the season. And if the player was happy and the agent's happy and the clubs are happy, then it all makes sense. But ultimately, the medical has basically been the deal breaker here, because something has shown up that Fulham are not happy about. And so, they're not going to take a gamble on a player, Russell, paying that kind of money if they're not happy with something. And as I said, he's got to get through a World Cup as well. So, it is too much of a risk at this moment. And because it's such an important position for Fulham at the moment moving forward.
Oh,
the club
have to get it right, Tony. They have to get it right.
They absolutely have to get it right. They absolutely have to get this right. So whoever comes in, there's going to be a huge expectation on that player's shoulders, whoever it is. And, they're not going to get 8, 9, 10 games to settle in. They've got to hit the ground running. And, it's a massive, massive decision. So whoever comes in as that player, the expectation is going to be huge.
Right. And what's interesting, because I was thinking about this, because I said this when we first started hearing this, even this week, that there's a stigma attached to players that come from the U.S. And it's funny. It's just, it's just a reality. You have that stigma. So I agree with you. If he was to come, he would have to start scoring goals right away. We're talking right away. Or he would be labeled Josh Sargent, who went to Norwich and didn't really work out there, ended up down the championship. And by the way, Josh Sargent is back in MLS. So that should just tell you he's back in MLS. Okay. So to be a striker, you have to hit the ground running, especially with that price tag, even though strikers go for a lot more, a lot of pressure on the kid. It might still happen. But again, if it does happen, whoever that striker is, they have to get it right. And that's what's so important about this. You can't F around with the striker position. You have to get it right. So if there's something that they're questioning, walk away. And that's what happened. And I'm, like I said, I can live with that. even though I wanted the player, I still want the player, but I want to make sure that the situation is right for the player and for Fulham. And if it's not right, they did the right thing. Anyways, let's move on, my friend. I got some other good topics for us. Let's now look back at Josh King. I want to talk about him because it's been, and I feel bad for the kid because I know that his future is so bright, Tony. I believe he's going to be playing for England someday. I still believe that. I think he's still, again, his body will catch up to his ability once he gets a little bit older. That's all going to work. We've seen it with Ryan Sessegnon. Only that's going to come as he gets older. But Josh King, I think, took a giant step. And there's a goal, and I spelled that wrong. I thought takes a giant step forward by scoring that goal, but also by the way he played. How do you make his performance against Burnley?
Look, Josh King is exuberant. He plays with no fear, Russ. He's got great energy. He is going to be a top player. There's no question in my mind. The only thing at the moment that hampers him, and he's going to have to learn to use his body, and he will over time, is obviously just the physicality of how he deals with certain 1v1 situations, or when he gets into those areas. But look, his ball and dribbling are on another level. We don't have anyone really quite like him other than Oscar Bob now, who's come in, and we haven't seen the best of him yet, but we will. Yep. His technical ability is. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're just having. I think your mic's just a little temperamental, just a little bit.
His technical ability is, very strong. He's very comfortable on the ball. He's got a great first touch, good close control. His passing's good. He's a strong dribbler. He's also, for his age, he's very mature, and his composure in certain situations is excellent. And also, he's got that versatility, Russ, where he can play. I think he can play a little bit more defensively at times, but he's got that ability to play centrally, attacking, can go deeper. He's got a good passing range. His agility's good. So there are so many things about him that make him, such an exciting player. And like I said, I don't want to rush him, Russ. I want to make sure that Fulham take their time with him. I'm so pleased that he got his goal Saturday, and he will continue to grow as long as he stays fit and healthy. Yep. He's been called up to the England under-21s now.
That's great. That's great.
He's moving on the right trajectory, and it's really important that we stay really patient with him and continue to develop him and continue to work with him. And, at some point, I've got no doubt about it, this kid will be playing for England, 100%. But I don't want to rush it. We need to take our time with him.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Chris, for basically talking about my Goldman. Yes, I made a Goldman, Chris. I make a Goldman every show, or 3 or 4. It's just what I do. But again, getting back to Josh King, and I'm glad that you mentioned this, because when you watch him play, the best way to describe it, plays with no fear, and not every player plays like that. And for me, I think that's also just the confidence that he has to play like that is amazing, and that's why he will be a special player if he isn't already. It's just a matter of time, and I'm glad that we're talking about this. Don't rush it. It will happen, and when it happens, it's going to be bang, and we're all going to just appreciate, and we'll hopefully have the best years of Josh King with Fulham, and that's what we want. So I'm just glad that he finally got that goal. He should have had it against Chelsea a long time ago, but he got it. And, it's a very good thing. So I just wanted to mention that. All right, let's go back to a favorite topic of mine, because we talk about stats, and stats can tell you things. And I've heard this about Emile Smith-Rowe. We're going to talk about Leno again. Let's do this. Do we underestimate the value of Leno, Tony? I'm going to say hell yes, because Leno made 2 key saves in this match that, again, are the difference between winning, losing, and getting a draw. Every keeper makes a mistake. I want Bernd Leno as the Fulham goalkeeper. I don't get wanting to replace Leno. Please explain to me why.
You know my thoughts on this, Russell, right? And if Fulham fans, are asking the question that they want, Leno replaced, and that's the answer that they want. So then I want to know what the question is, because, right. And Chris is absolutely spot on here. right? Leno is, without shadow of a doubt, one of the top 5 goalkeepers in the Premier League, right? You saw it at the weekend. You've seen it in games up and down the country for the last 6 weeks. Goalkeepers make mistakes, right? That is the nature of being a goalkeeper. It happens. Mistakes happen. But from a and all this nonsense now that, you know, and I blame Pep Guardiola for this, because he's brought in this notion that goalkeepers have to be good with their feet. Why? A goalkeeper has to be good with their hands, Russell, right? They have to be good saving shots, okay? They have to be good with their distribution from their hands, being able to throw the ball. Positionally, they have to be good, and they have to be big and strong. And Leno has got all of those qualities. And any Fulham fan that wants him replaced needs to give their head a little bit of a wobble and realise how lucky we are to have him. Because I tell you what, when the day he goes, Russell, Fulham fans are going to be crying for him to come back, because he's not going to be easy to replace. And you look at the situation that Arsenal have got with Kepa playing yesterday, right? Have got with Sancho, right? It's an absolute joke that Fulham fans want this guy replaced. We are lucky to have him, and hopefully we get to keep him for at least 2 or 3 more seasons. Yeah. Because who the hell are we going to bring in to replace him? Tell me now, who?
I don't know. And
who do Fulham fans want to replace him with?
You know, so listen.
No, I'm sorry. He's been instrumental and one of the main reasons. And let me tell you, we would have lost that game on Saturday if it wasn't for Leno. Let me tell you that for nothing.
That's why I'm bringing it up, Tony. That's why I'm bringing it up.
We are lucky to have him.
We are, my friend. That's why I wanted to talk about Bernd Leno again, because I see the criticism and I'm like, just let it go. He, as Chris said, he's still a top 5 goalkeeper. Please, just let it go. Anyway, but people are entitled to their opinion.
Make a mistake again? Absolutely. Yes, he will. But for every mistake he makes 5 or 6 unbelievable saves, or has 6 unbelievable moments.
Did he make one against West Ham? Of course he did. Of course he did. But
name a goalkeeper that doesn't. Name me one goalkeeper that doesn't make mistakes. They all make mistakes.
Ask Joe Bryan in the playoff final about taking advantage of a goalkeeper who happens to be playing for Arsenal. Exactly. next time, just remember that moment. He's the goalkeeper for Arsenal. Just keep that in mind. And he makes mistakes. All right. Anyway,
he will go down as one of our great players, Russell, over the seasons. Once he's up and he's retired, people will look back and go, do you know what? He is up there with Van der Sar, Schwarzer, you know, all of those guys. He is definitely, I think he is. No question.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. My friend, one final topic before we break down the match and just get quick thoughts on the starting 11. I just want to just go to this because I mentioned this to you when we started the show. I call it really the 2 sides of Fulham, right? What was the change with the level of play from the first half to the second half? It would be nice to have like a full 90-minute plus performance where we just look at it throughout the performance. I would say Tottenham was a lot like that, but we didn't see that here. We saw a first half which was, again, very disappointing, Tony. And then second half, like you had mentioned earlier, it doesn't really seem to come alive. It really came alive after Burnley scored, but at least Fulham came out with intent to start the second half. What was the change for you?
Well, there are a lot of facets to this. So basically, for me, there's 2 things. Obviously, bringing on Sessegnon and Chukwueze, that for me was the first massive change, especially Sessegnon coming on for Robinson. That was a big change, and I'll tell you why. Fulham's build-up was so predictable for the first 65, 66 minutes. And it became, our build-up was too slow. We allowed Burnley to basically shift across the pitch. They cut out all the lines. They made it very difficult for us to break. And when you start that slowly, it's very difficult to change the tempo and to levels. I thought Muniz was particularly poor. He worked hard, he tries hard, but his hold-up play wasn't good enough at times. I thought we were very limited with our positional rotations in midfield at times. So the passing lanes were easy to mark, and I think Burnley did that. Scott Parker did his homework and did that very well. And then our delivery from wide areas was really poor. And so all of those things together, which genuinely after 66 minutes improved when Chukwueze and Sessegnon came on, that's the shift for me. That's what changed. But up until that point, that was the reason why.
Okay, excellent. No, I think a very good analysis of why we saw such a change, because that first half, that was dire. And I've seen too many halves like that. And but it's good to see, like I said, there was a change, and you see a distinct change, and at least they found a way to win. And like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, Tony, at this point of the season, we're just looking for points. We're looking for victories, mostly, more than just 1 point. We're looking for victories. It's not really about the performance. It's about the result. It's about getting all 3 points. That's what they did, but it's still fascinating to see how it's really hard to see Fulham get a complete 90-plus minute match. It's disappointing, and I want better. And I'm sorry I'm saying that, but I definitely want better. Anyways, coming up next, Tony and I will break down the match, and we will end with man of the match. All right, my friend, let's get to it. All right, let's go to the starting 11. What do you make of the starting 11?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was any, major surprises, to be perfectly honest. Well, the one that I was actually really surprised was Raul not starting, but and obviously I would have thrown Sessegnon in instead of Robinson, and I think that debate is now over after Saturday. I don't expect to see Robinson start another Fulham game for the rest of the season.
I cannot put my finger on this. I don't know what is going on, Tony. Listen, you're there. What are you seeing from him? What is going on?
Not a lot. I'm seeing a player that he can't tackle.
Lack of confidence?
He can't defend. I just don't think he's a very good footballer, Russ. Look, you got to remember, right? He had an incredible purple patch last season, right? And for whatever reason, he was flying. He was high on confidence. He was very fit, and a lot of that was, had to do with the fact that his performances showed that, right? His fitness levels have dropped off. The injury has definitely affected him. There's no question about it. But the bottom line is, Russell, Anthony Robinson is a great athlete. He's not a good footballer. And people have to understand that. He's missing so many qualities as a footballer. It's actually embarrassing. And so when he's not quite at the level athletically, his game is very, very basic. And that is what we've started to see. He can't defend. His distribution from wide areas, when he gets into those areas, is so poor. Positionally, his body shape is often the wrong way round. And I just think that ultimately, it's time to move him on now. Right? He can't offer us anything more. And for me, Ryan Sessegnon is just a much, much better footballer in every department. All right, he's not as explosive as Robinson, from a pace perspective, but who cares? I want my left back defending.
And he's the better defender. I think we've established that. 100%. And he's also the better crosser of the ball, too.
100%.
So,
yeah, look, I mean, ultimately, I didn't think there was anything particularly wrong. Obviously, Tete was a miss. I think Castagna did all right. But again, he gets found out.
Castagna played pretty good.
Yeah, but he gets found out as well, Russ. And in fact, there was a couple of occasions on Saturday where he did get found out.
Right.
And, if you look at Burnley's goal, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that was catastrophic on so many levels. But look, it was.
I want to talk to you about that goal.
Yeah, look, the bottom line is that we were very slow. We struggled to create any tempo in the game, and that was down to basically the starting 11 not getting into the gear that they needed to get into. And it was on Silva to change it, and thankfully he did, and thankfully it worked out.
Yeah, good point. All right, let's get to talking about the first half. There really isn't a tremendous amount to talk about the first half, so we're just going to break it up into 3 parts. Let's start with one that I've seen a lot of complaining about, and I think this was in front of you. So, again, you probably got a decent view of this. And did Burnley deserve a penalty?
No.
Okay, because
no. I think the first half, Russell. Look, that before that led up to that penalty, right?
Yeah.
You got to remember, Calvin Bassey made an unbelievable block on 7 minutes. I think it was around 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Where the Burnley player's cutting, I can't remember who it was, but he's cutting through Castagna and Iwobi, who, by the way, that defending from both of them was shocking. They've put in a good ball, Burnley, and actually Bassey has made a great block. And really at that point, Burnley should have been 1-0 up after 7 minutes. Yeah.
Yep.
The next thing after that, Harry Wilson obviously has that long range shot on 19 minutes where it flies over the bar, never really. But then on 21 minutes, Fulham should have been 2-0 down when Fleming got in between and that point blank header should have scored. Leno makes a really good save, but really at that point on 20 minutes, Fulham should have been 2-0 down.
Yeah.
And we would have been 2-0 down had Burnley been more, what's it called? Deadly clinical in those moments. So no, the penalty definitely not. I mean, I don't know what your views on it, but I definitely
listen. I totally agree with you. It shouldn't have been. And again, I see it as excuse making. But like you said, Burnley had the better opportunities in that first half. Let's talk about Fulham's opportunities. You talked about Harry Wilson. What did you make of what they offered or what they did not offer in the first half?
But they didn't offer anything. And the big, look, I'm not Scott Parker's biggest fan, Russ, by any stretch of the imagination. But what you have to give him kudos for is out of possession, Burnley, their structure was excellent. And, they were very compact, and Fulham really struggled to break them down. And when when Burnley's vertical lines and their compactness were very, very tight, what you need is you can't have Sander Berge sitting so deep and just sitting in front of our back four, playing, crab passes left and right. You need to penetrate. And the fact of the matter is we just weren't doing it enough. The only lively player we had in that first half was Josh King. He was the liveliest player on the pitch, but he can't do it himself. He needs support. And so what happened was we were forced out wide, which Burnley did well, but we were so slow and we didn't get Muniz into the box and we didn't get crosses into the box. So what happened is Burnley picked up second balls and then they, basically hit us as much as they could, kept possession and kept turning it over. And it made it very difficult for us. And that's why we were so poor, us. They made us look poor.
Well, hey, I'm not a fan. I can't stand Parker, but Parker does have the ability to set his team up to stop a team from playing. We know this, right? So, as you mentioned, did his homework. The only other basic thing that I'll just mention him, I'll give him his kudos. He's well dressed. Okay, that's about as far as I'm going to go with him. Very well dressed. I care less about that stuff, but they always talk about how sharp dressed Scott Parker is. I'll give him that. But he does set his team up well. It's just boring football to watch, and made it difficult on Fulham. But then we go to the second half, Tony, and I know you're focusing. Your big focus was when Marco made the changes. But even before that, I thought Fulham came out fairly strong. You had Josh King really going for it at the beginning stages of that second half. What did you make about the approach to begin the second half?
Well, I can only imagine that Marco Silva would have absolutely torn into them at half-time. He could not have been happy with that performance. And the players were booed off the pitch at half-time because it was such a drab. It was just drab. It was just nothing was going on. We couldn't keep possession. We were giving the ball away. So Marco Silva, 100%, must have torn into them and given them a bollocking. So yeah, they came out a little bit more lively, but the truth of the matter is they couldn't have been any worse than that first half. So there was a little bit more energy, a little bit more purpose. But then obviously, whilst we're, trying to edge ourselves back into a game, the worst thing that could possibly happen happens.
And we're going right there, my friend. So let's talk about this. I asked you, all right, you've had a chance. I'm assuming you've had a chance to watch it back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's analyze this goal. I think you've already talked a little bit about it. Very disappointing. It's a wonderful strike. Let's give Fleming a lot of credit here. Wonderful strike. Wonderful delivery, quick delivery. Are Fulham to blame, though, for this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because we gave possession away as we were. We were too passive in that situation. We have to defend that goal so much better. First of all, we have to stop the cross coming in. can anyone tell me what Anthony Robinson is doing so far over? I just don't understand what he's doing.
Yeah.
You know, the ball in that area is not the danger. The player is the danger in that situation, and Robinson has to see that and get there a lot quicker. So he's now out the game. The ball comes in. Can someone please tell me what Joachim Andersen is doing when that ball comes in?
I told you about this when I told you about the reaction I got from the broadcast that I listened to. They were saying, well, you know, there was no real blame on him. So obviously you have a different view of that.
I've watched it. I've seen it. And I'm not happy with that situation at all. If I'm Anderson and Robinson and you know, Bassi as well and Castagna as a collective back four, that is a shocking goal to concede, I'm afraid. Okay. Really, really poor. Because, you know, that should not be happening. They should have been a lot tighter, should have closed it down a lot quicker, and he should never have got that opportunity. And for me, that was a, you know, really, really poor goal to concede. But unfortunately, Russell, we have that in us.
Yeah, every game.
Teams will score goals like that because we are not good enough defensively. Individually, we've got too many players that switch off at key moments, and we get punished for it. And we got punished in that moment. I
totally agree with you. Like I said, we can see this once a game. Maybe not every game, but pretty much we are vulnerable to situations like that.
Burnley should have been out of sight before that goal. Yeah. To be perfectly honest with you, they had the best chances and they should have been out of sight.
Yeah. I definitely would not disagree with you on that, my friend. All right. Let's now talk about, I think it was about 6 or 7 minutes later, we're going to talk about Josh King's goal. I know Matt has already mentioned about who was involved in this. It was Sander Berge with the pass here, Tony. So again, we have to give Berge credit when credit is due here. So great pass. Josh King does the rest from here. Thoughts on the equalizer here?
Yeah, well, look, he's alive. He reacts to you know, he's always on his toes. He reacts to the mistake the goalkeeper makes, and he's on the ball like a flash. And you know, it was just a great moment for him. And he managed to find the one area that he needs to put the ball in, and he's done it. And you know, fair play to him, and he deserved it because he was Fulham's brightest player at that point, Russell. You know, he was always involved, always trying to make things happen. And you know what? Fair play to him, and he deserved that moment. And actually, that then shifted the momentum for us because Burnley, it was like putting a pin in a balloon. Yeah. Burnley's heads, when that goal went in, Burnley just seemed to go. They just seemed to mentally just completely, you know, go.
Yeah, it completely changed. Talking about flipping the script, it completely changed from that point on. And then you have Fulham getting the second goal from Harry Wilson. And listen, we've seen this many times from him, but this is, if you watch this back and you see the player's legs that it goes through, it's actually pretty cool how Harry Wilson sets up the goal. So full credit to Harry Wilson for giving Fulham the go-ahead goal, which ended up being the goal that won the match, Tony. Let's talk about Harry Wilson's goal.
Yeah, listen, that's what he does. You know, he's got that in his locker, and everyone knows once he cuts in defensively, you have to know that he wants to get it onto that, you know, left foot. And if he gets into those areas and you give him a yard, he will take full advantage of that. And that's exactly what he did. That's what Harry Wilson does, you know, so well. And, you know, we were literally to the side of it. And you know, the minute he cut in, I turned to my son and said, you know what, he's going to score. And the minute he left his foot, bang. And that's a player in form, playing with confidence. And if you give him those moments, he will punish you at the moment because of the way he's playing. And that was, you know, that was a moment for Burnley that they will, you know, that killed the game for them, really.
Absolutely. And I do want to mention before we talk about Raul's goal penalty, after that, you have Burnley going for it. And I didn't put this down, but I want to talk about the save. And like I said, the broadcast called this an incredible save. Would you agree that this was an incredible save by Bernd Leno here that actually saved the victory for Fulham?
This is what your goalkeeper's there for, Russell. And this is why, for me, you know, he is priceless because he has to be big in that moment. And he was. And that's what you're relying on your goalkeeper. You know, there's 25 minutes have gone by. He hasn't really been involved. He hasn't done much. But then in that one moment where you need your goalkeeper to be big and strong, that's where, you know, his world-class qualities come in. And yeah, it was a big, big save, because obviously that goes to 2-2.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's, you know, it could have been a very different, you know, finish. So yeah, massive save. And he, you know, he more than played his part on the day, Leno. So yeah, brilliant save.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we'll go all the way to stoppage time, and again, a great delivery to Raul. And I've heard talk about this. You know, was it a penalty? Of course, it was a penalty. He's nudging him in the back. This is definitely a penalty. Okay, but what I really want to focus on with you is the criticism that I've heard about how Raul does his staggered start twice, and how potentially that's not legal. I think it's legal, or he wouldn't be able to get away with this. What do you make of the way he takes his penalties?
Look, at the end of the day, as long as he's not stopping and starting, in terms of, you know, you can't run up, stop, and then run up.
He's not doing that.
No, he's constantly on the move the whole time. It's just his technique and the way he does it. And look, ultimately, you know, if it was illegal, they would have told him to retake it, or it would have been, you know, disallowed. So whatever. Look, at the end of the day, that is his technique. It works for him. He's confident with it. And the bottom line is that, you know, he's a level above in terms of, you know, anyone on that spot. And he's proved it, because his record is outstanding. So, you know, I don't ever sit there and think to myself, oh my God, you know, he's going to, I've got full confidence every time he puts that ball down. I know it's a goal.
Yeah.
I mean, there will come a time eventually, I'm sure,
that he's going to miss,
where it will happen. But I'm pretty relaxed when he puts that ball down. I'm like, yeah, right, that's another goal. Happy days.
Yeah, I can't say the same thing when I watched Mitro do that.
No.
I actually saw Tim Ream take one, Tony. I don't know if you remember this, and thinking, what the hell's going on here? So I've seen some strange penalty takers from Fulham. Mitro should have been as dominant as Raul, but he certainly was not. He certainly did not have the technique that this guy has. So
no, he's a craftsman. He works on it every
you
day training, and he's got it down to a fine art, Russ.
Science, yeah, fine art. That's a good way to fine art. He's gonna miss, but it's gonna happen. But it hasn't happened. So right now, it's incredible to watch. I always feel comfortable. I always feel he's gonna score. I never feel he's not going to. There will come a time, though. All right, Tony, to end the show, who are you giving the man of the match to?
Only one, the King.
The King.
Josh King.
Good for him, man. Seriously.
Yeah, outstanding from the first minute to the last, and yeah, absolutely deserved his goal. Was our brightest player on the day. As I said, energetic, full of running and confidence, and yeah, he was just a joy to watch. And as I said, he's only going to get stronger and better, Russ. So yeah, man of the match for me all day long.
Okay, I'm going to agree with you tonight. I'm going to share this. Let's see. Brian says Josh King as well. Matt definitely wants to go back and talk about the goal conceded, because if you rewatch the goal we conceded, the overload on the flank was because Wilson doesn't track back to follow Hartman, so Berge and Innocent have to move out of position.
But that happens all the time, Russ. And the thing is that Anderson and Bassi have to know that their central halves should not be leaving, regardless. I'd rather watch the player run and come onto them than them shift out of position and leave whacking great holes. Because what happens is there's no communication when that happens, and you can see it because Robertson looks like a lost sheep at times. He gets so detached from things, and all of it. Then he's panicking, and he doesn't know whether he's coming or going, and it's a problem. But they have to work on it, and it's down to Silva to address those issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, Matt makes a very good point, and in game situation, obviously it's very different. But look, I think it's an area that Fulham have to improve on. And at the end of the day, these are professional footballers that are paid to do the job, and at times they don't do it very well. And I hate to be critical of our defensive players, but it's a problem, Russ. And if we don't look at it and if we don't talk about it and if it's not addressed, it's going to continue to happen. And, you know, one clean sheet, you know, last clean sheet was Forest.
Yeah.
But we don't keep clean sheets. And if we want to be a team that wants to push on, we have to start keeping clean sheets. It has to be, you know, Arsenal have catapulted themselves to the next level is because now defensively they are so solid. They have got it down to a fine art. You talk about fine art, they have got defending down to a fine art. We need to start looking at how we can improve defensively.
Okay, so Matt's comeback is clean sheet versus Forest because Anderson had to help Tete with the overload.
Yep, good point.
Okay, fair enough. Matt's in there with some very good comments. Thanks as always, Matt. Thanks to everyone that's commented. We really appreciate that. All right, my friend, let's end with final thoughts on anything you want, my friend. The one thing I'll give you my final thoughts is that I hate it's going to be, I don't know how long till we see our next Fulham match. How about that?
It's quite depressing, actually, because honestly, I can't be asked with this international break. It does my brain in. Got to watch all these, you know, overrated Muppets playing for England that half of them shouldn't even be in the squad in the first place. And then, you know, we don't play now till the 11th of April. It's a long, long time.
It's insane.
And we all know what happens when Fulham come back from the international break. So, look, I think ultimately, Russ, there's going to be loads of players going off on different journeys and different games and whatever. Just got to pray and hope that everyone comes back fit and healthy. That's the first thing. And then obviously, you know, Fulham have got a massive 3 games coming up. The bottom line, you know, Liverpool, Brentford and Villa will not be easy. Yeah. So
no, I agree.
Let's hope and pray that they all come back healthy and then we can reevaluate them.
Okay. I got a bonus topic before we end the show because Chris is going back and forth. He's talking. I think he's quite happy with the international break. So, Chris, I want your answer to this question. I'll give Tony the same one. Okay. If you had your choice between Arne Slot and Marco Silva, who's your manager? Tony, who's your manager? And then I'll go to Chris.
Marco
Silva. Chris, is it Marco Silva or is it Arne Slot? Hopefully you can give us a comment here. I really want to know. I'm going with Marco Silva because I don't think Arne Slot is really a great manager. I think he happened to come into a very good situation. So, we have a unanimous. He's going with Silva too. That just tells you how bad Arne Slot really is, man. If like you're talking the manager of Liverpool, you got a Liverpool supporter telling me he would take Marco Silva over Arne Slot. So I'm taking
that game should be billed, Russell, as you know, which defense is going to be the worst on the day. Because that's whoever the team wins the game on who defends the worst on the day. That's basically the bottom line.
Okay, yeah, because it's gonna be an interesting game, man. It's gonna be an interesting game. I look forward to that, but like I just said, I'm so sick that we're gonna have to wait a long time. Matt brings up a good point. There are some good matchups coming up to watch, but beyond that, there really isn't a lot. I just want to see Fulham play, so I'm disappointed with that. Anyways, I do want to mention I'm working on, over this long international break, a couple of special shows. So I'm working on some special guests. And one I'm hoping to get that goes far, far back. So I don't want to say who it is because I want to make sure I get it done before, and I will promote it. But it's someone that's never been on the show before. But I will just say it's a former Fulham player I'm trying to get on the show who wants to come on. We just see if we can make it work. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up this show. For Tony Gold, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the TalkSport Fan Network.